Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and my emergency co-host today is Luis Martinez. And today we have Emily Earhart and William Munn, and we are going to be talking about mob world building for games and fiction, collaborative analog design processes, and general leaning up of things at work and play. Is there really a difference? We can jump into that soon, but before we do, Emily, would you introduce yourself and then pass it off to Will?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Emily. I do world building and game design using these cool tools that we're going to talk about today. Currently, I'm working with Will to create a game called Vi the Ancestrals, and it is a tarot card RPG, which is going to be really cool. Hopefully, come out later this year.
All right, awesome. And Will.
Great. I'm Will Munn, and I've been in software for, a couple of decades, and have started doing a lot of work with analog game design over the last, I would say, probably 6 years or so, and have had a lot of fun with that, including much of what we're going to talk about. Let's see. What else to say? Oh yeah. I run the Adept Icarus game design and publishing studio. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. And real quick, because our audience may not know Luis, maybe Luis, you want to give a sound bite about yourself as well?
Yeah, I'm a software developer working at Hunter for the last 9 or so years. Board game shops started before then, so I'm in 2010. Haven't delved too much into making my own board games yet, but I have dabbled in expansions and the occasional rules argument. Um, yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, yeah, maybe we can jump into mob world building for games and fiction. So, what do you have in mind there? It sounds really interesting. I can tell I'm already going to be a fan.
Right. Well, it's actually an idea that came about as part of a writing group. So we were actually using, I'm assuming your audience is going to be familiar with like Lean Coffee. We were using Lean Coffee to organize like this writing group, basically, this work-based writing group. So we're at work and we're taking like a lunch break and we're talking about ideas for what we want to talk about and learn to be better writers. And so we used it to kind of like select topics for things we wanted to talk about and just basically do the Lean Coffee thing, right? And somebody in the group was like, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if we just used this to make a world? Like, and then you could write about it. And I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that. But we actually did do it as an experiment one time. And it went so well that myself and this other person, his name is Drew Gherkin, we went to a couple of sort of writing conventions and did it with a group of people on a panel, basically, right? And just did like a whole room of people, and we did Lane Coffee with them to make a world, basically. And it was so successful and so fun, and everybody just loved it, that I came back and said, okay, how do we turn this into like an actual game? Because it's not a game right now, it's just a fun activity, right? And so we kind of spent a lot of time, actually a couple years in development on it, and eventually did a Kickstarter and made a book and released it. So yeah, that's kind of how it came about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That would be, I guess, on the fiction side, right? And then that eventually turned into a game as well, or?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually use this tool to make worlds for games as well. And that's something Em and I have done a lot of. We could talk about that more. But the book itself is actually part of a series of tabletop role-playing game books, right? Called Arium. And so that first book is called Arium Create, and it's just about doing world building. And there's a little more nuance to it than just Lean Coffee. Like there are some tokens that you can use as kind of a currency to do some things, and there's a little structure around it where you say, hey, we're going to go through these phases, and And the main difference between it and sort of traditional lean coffee is you're always building on what you did before, right? So you're going to start at kind of the highest level and do some creation, and you'll collaborate and talk together, and then you vote after you get through that part of things. And then you move on to another round where you get into more detail, and everything you said before is true, right? And so you're building off of that true thing that you've already established, this canon, right? And then expanding on it and doing another round of the same thing. We basically go through 7 rounds of that to generate a really cool world for a game or for fiction or whatever you want.
Nice. Emily, do you have anything to add from that standpoint?
Yeah, just to kind of add on to that. So I came into Arium Create like when it was an early phase and like Kickstarter process. So I'm a streamer. I like to do games online, and Will introduced me to Trello, which was like my first introduction to any of this sort of stuff. And I was like, I need a program that lets me contact with people across the globe immediately, and we can be updating the same thing that I can put on a screen and like show Twitch. And it became like a really cool process where we were in real time crafting these things with audience participation. And it was just, it's a great time. Yeah. Big recommend.
Awesome.
It was kind of funny just because I didn't have a background in it at all. So all I've ever used this sort of stuff for is for role-playing games.
So did you do any live streams of the game playing or anything along those lines? Is that
Yeah, across many channels, actually. We had a fun game that Will put together that was on PG from Survivor. She ran it on her channel for us, and we had a bunch of cool guests, and it was a really awesome time. You can find that all on YouTube, I think, on Will's channel.
fantastic? Yeah, we'll collect some links and we'll put them in the show notes for sure. Yeah, and so in these formats, are there any I don't know, specific things that either of you would call out as being really interesting side effects of doing story building this way or game building this way?
Yeah, it's actually a really phenomenal consensus building tool, I think, right? You would think that maybe if you're going through this process and you're trying to create something and everybody is doing their own creation, that maybe people would get upset if their thing didn't get voted in or whatever. But the way it actually works out is generally everybody just loves what comes out at the end. And they're happy with it because, I mean, it's kind of what lean coffee is meant to do, right? It's meant to find a way to help people get on the same page about what to talk about and get those most important things on and continue thinking about them and improving them. And sometimes you do the drill down thing with lean coffee as well, but it's a little more structured the way we have it in the game.
All right. Emily, anything like serendipitous that you caught or any particular moment in a game that was like, whoa, I never thought that would have come up?
Yeah, I have had that happen so many times, unfortunately. It's hard to narrow it down to one experience because everybody has such vastly different ideas that once you get them on the page and you start pairing them together, you get incredible genre mashes. We did Old West with dragons one time, and just being able to like, okay, you know what? How was the interaction with dragons in the Old West? You get these really wild combinations. What's another cool one we had? We had everybody had superpowers and they were related to Greek and Roman gods.
Oh, yeah.
And they're traversing between being up in the sky or beneath the ocean. And it's just absolutely incredible the concepts you can come up with. And not only do you do that like with just the world building for games, you can also take it into a writing direction. I think Arium was originally going to be for books, right, Will?
We had talked about it potentially being that way, yeah, but it didn't end up that because it just felt like a game, right?
Yeah. It's just so much fun.
Yeah. I think, there are a lot of, that's a great example, right? Is that it's always somewhat unexpected, I think, what comes out of it. I've never had a case where I came out of it with, like basically something that was like, oh, well, we've just created the Expanse again, or
Mhm.
we've just created the Wheel of Time or something like that. It's always unique and feels different because of the different minds that come together and the way that it works out.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. If you've ever found that you've gravitated to particular concepts or um, I hate to say genres, but just
Mhm.
like similar ideas before. For example, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to stop myself from like not doing a sci-fi one every time. So I would have to keep that in check.
Yeah.
But that's personally me.
Yeah, no, and I love science fiction, so it comes up a lot. Sometimes they end up mashed up a little bit, which can be
Mhm.
fun. I don't know. We've done a couple of, so we've been using this more recently. Now it's a game. It's out there. People can buy it. Like we're very close to selling out of our original print run now. So probably gonna maybe go to
Oh,
Kickstarter and do
congratulations.
a reprint here before too long. But that's sold out, then there'll be 1,000 print copies out there, and then there are quite a lot of digitals as well, right? So it's for sale digitally in several formats, and uh, and so there's probably maybe another 1,000 copies out there that way. Um, but so it's not like huge. It's not Dungeons and Dragons, right? But it's got a community, and so we're going to keep working on it. Actually, have some plans to continue to expand on it. But the way that we've been using it more recently is to design worlds for, as Emily mentioned, for Vi.
Mhm.
So Vi it's a multiverse setting. And so we have, you mentioned, I think that we use tarot cards. And so in a tarot deck, there are 22 trump cards called the Major Arcana. And each one of those is a different world in this game that we've been making. And so we build a new world for every single one of them. And that's what's going to be in the final product when it gets released.
Yeah, it sounds like a great way to collaborate.
It
Yeah.
is a good way to collaborate because we can like join with the community and just get it going. But also it helps us come up with 22 fresh ideas that we could never have thought of on our own, which is awesome because it gets really, it drills down into some really creative topics, I think.
All right. Well, maybe it's a good time to jump over to kind of the next topic, collaborative analog game design practices. What do you have in mind there?
You want to start, Em?
Do I want to start, Will? I don't know. Um,
I want them to hear it from the viewpoint of someone who hasn't worked like this professionally in software. So I think
sure,
Yeah, you got to know
sure.
our audience is
yeah,
very familiar with Trello and Lean Coffee and stuff, and maybe
right.
less familiar with, board gaming or live streaming
Mhm.
a story-driven game, right?
Sure. Okay. I think first off, from just like an absolute fresh perspective on this, it has a couple of things that really stand out to me. First off, the organization is gorgeous. I always know like what we're working on and what we're working towards and what we've finished. And having those like Kanban boards built in, we're using Notion right now. And so we use like the Kanban board and we have like what hasn't been started, what is in progress, what is done. And just being able to have that organization and that free up to date between the two of us, where we can also assign tasks as needed or jump onto the same one and just like work through a topic. It's just been super helpful, but also not limiting. It doesn't ever feel like it's a checklist that I am constantly having to update. It feels like an interactive tool that actually keeps you inspired and moving forward.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so so I'm doing this with several different collaborative partners on several different games right now, actually. And all of us, we meet like maybe once a week or maybe twice a week, right? And we usually do like in-person collaboration that entire time whenever we meet. So we'll go like review what we've got going on the board. Like, was there anything that wasn't finished? Usually we try and finish things before the end of a given session. Session might last between 2 and 4 hours, something like that. And then we, just open up our IDE is Notion, basically, right? So we're writing, and we write in an iterative style. So we're writing, usually start with bullet points,
Mhm.
and then bullet points get more specific, and then they become paragraphs. Sometimes we go and make a graphic that we insert in, and just continue to improve iteratively on everything in the entire manuscript, I guess, as we go. And then
Mhm.
sometimes we stop and say, okay, we've got a concept here. Let's go test it out. And we'll go to like Miro or something like that. And we'll
Mhm.
sometimes we'll whiteboard out like the flow of how something's working. It might be like a flow chart. It might be just an actual like live play test. Right? Let's try this, right? Let's run through it a few times and see what happens. But we do it all together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's funny because Miro it certainly can be used for playtesting something like that. And I think of hosting games in Roll20 or other systems like that. And it's the collaborative design tools have kind of turned into actual board game like locations, right? Or something like that. It's very similar technologies all across the board. So I find it
Yeah.
really interesting that it's grown so much in that space. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's pretty nice. If everybody actually has a license for Miro, there's a couple of tools out there you can like plugins you can use for it that even will do dice rolling and card drawing if you have individual images of all the cards that you want to use and
Mhm.
just put them in a stack and it'll randomly bring one to the top. And yeah, so it's kind of nice. We actually use that quite a bit.
Every Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Do you so in this like in your regular meetings, do you find that like one meeting will influence the other, or are they just completely different groups of people on different projects? Is that how it is?
Yeah, it uh usually it's different projects.
Oh, okay.
So it's because we're writing, games or books for games, right? It's usually only two or three people
Okay.
per collaborative group. And so usually it's all those people meeting together whenever we're working on something.
Is there anything that you do to resolve conflicts, like a big disagreement or something like that? Or
Hmm.
yeah.
What do we do to resolve conflicts, Sam?
I think that we test the different theories. We say, okay, so you think it should go this way. What does that look like? What does that affect from what we've already written and what we are going to write, and how does it work out with the dice, the cards? Let's do the math on the different pieces. What does that change in the chance? And yeah, it just comes to testing, and then is it fun? Is it too fiddly? There's just like a series of questions, like I feel like we go through to find out what the best solution is.
Yeah. Sometimes so we're working in Notion and it's like a Google
Mhm.
document or whatever, so you can both be editing at the same time. We don't always, we're usually not always editing at the same time. Usually somebody's driving, right? And somebody's talking ideas. But sometimes if we're like, you know what, we're not coming, neither one of us is coming up with a great idea here, we'll both stop and write for like for a minute or two, and then come back and look at what each of us has
Mhm.
written and see what we like. And yeah, and maybe end up with a combination of the two, or maybe one of them's just better.
Oftentimes it is a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really fun because we're on like the similar track and we both have half of the puzzle. Like,
Yeah.
perfect. We can marry this together now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember there was a Comic Con that I went to a long, long time ago when Lost was still popular. I guess the TV show Lost, and the writers were talking to each other, and one of the things they talked about was writing themselves into a corner and then trying to work their way out. You see any of that? Like, I feel like there's really a big opportunity here for adversarial games. Like, one person writes the group into a corner and then the others have to be creative to bail you out or something like that. Is anything like that happening or?
You want to answer that, Will?
No.
I wouldn't say so much writing into a corner, though there are times where like, ooh, that doesn't work because of X, Y, and Z. And it's just like a matter of retooling. It can be kind of difficult, I guess, especially if you're like really passionate about the idea that you had. And if it just doesn't fit, you have to just put it in maybe another time folder. Maybe somewhere else, maybe a different game.
We do have a backlog of things that are not for now, basically, right? Like that just didn't work at the moment. But I think that one of the things that happens is we when we work on something, it's often in a way that we can come to, I think, a good sort of consensus approach to something. But like with code, sometimes you built in some sort of assumption early on that is incorrect or wrong, right? And then you have to go back and you have to refactor, right? And you have to refactor everything because it's everywhere, right? Sometimes if you're unlucky, if you're lucky, it's not everywhere, but and it's not as easy with, English as a written language to just replace everything, maybe like it can sometimes be with code, or maybe you've sort of centralized your concerns. And we do try and centralize concerns, obviously, right? You don't want to say the same thing in 10 different places in the manuscript.
Refer to page 5.
Or short code or something for
particular
concept.
Go to page 5. But but we do sometimes we just tackle that, it's like, okay, well, you start at the bottom of the manuscript, I'll start at the top, and we'll find all the references to this thing, and we'll fix it.
Just brute force your way right through.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, one concept I've come up with this is not specifically it was more for like music and not coding, because but one thing that's been pretty liberating is when I ask whoever I'm working with, it's like, it's your turn for a solo idea. You have your permission to do like the worst or the best you want, but just have that freedom. Granted, it's a little bit more straightforward when you have different editing sound channels to then change it if we need be, but the freedom, and you kind of get some really good ideas. It's like, I'm gonna do the worst thing I got, and then like, but we love it. It's like, hey, let's incorporate that kind of deal. And I'm curious if like if you guys have kind of a similar level of like safety with that regards, like just like give me the most fun idea, or give me like the most or your most I guess like cold logical idea as possible.
I think the first example that comes to my mind for that is sometimes when we're really stuck and we're just like, I don't know how to say this. We're like, well, I'm just going to put garbage words on the page and we can fix it later. And we just get like, once we have a page of garbage, it can then turn into a refined half page of legitimate readable words. That's probably, we just have to have that comfort of being like, hey, I'm going to put some garbage down. We can sort the garbage later. Okay. And just tap away at that.
So is it something where you like have just a document open and everybody's writing into it for the story writing? I understand the play testing in Miro. Or is it just like rough ideas that will then get refined into more flowing logic later? Or language.
So a lot of what we do is, more around rules and things. So it does end up being a little bit more like, a little more structured. And so we started with an outline, right, of the entire thing. And it's set up in Notion in a way that you have, nested like things as part of that outline. And so we'll say, okay, this page is where we're going to explain this to people who want to play the game, right? And we'll start with, just bullet points and put down like Em said, sometimes complete garbage, right? It's like,
Mhm.
we think this and maybe this and then probably that, right? And just go through, and then later we'll come back and maybe we've tested some of those assumptions in a play test, and then we'll refine them, and some of them might get removed entirely. Actually, that's happened quite a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and some of them persist and just get honed into something that is better and easier to understand. And sometimes we come back to things that are on some of those pages and say, what on earth were we thinking? I have no idea what was going on here. Like, if there's something that's important here, let's like pull it out of the manuscript, put it in like an item in the backlog or something, and then we can determine if that's something we ever care about ever again. But sometimes it just isn't, and it just gets deleted when we review those things.
All right. When mob programming, I see people taking turns, right? Or there's usually a timer, blocks up the screen,
Yep.
rotates the driver. Do you do anything like that to rotate the driver, quote unquote, or whoever's manipulating the computer or the tool that you're using?
We haven't, but I think it would be really interesting to do it. I
Mhm.
think we're pretty good about switching off turns. And so I think that's usually it's like, somebody's brain power will start to go down and then you switch off, right?
Mhm.
And that kind of is the natural timer. At least for me. I don't M's brain power probably never really ebbs, but
That's
mine
not
mine
true.
does. Um, but with the one of the other groups that I do this with, where there are three of us, right? I think that approach is a little more essential, right? When there's just two of you, usually you can get
Yeah.
into a flow that works for the two of you, I think. But when there's more than two, it gets difficult to make sure that everybody is getting sort of
Mhm.
a minute of spotlight to talk about what's working for them and to continue.
All right. Well, might be a good time to switch to the next topic. General leaning up of things at work and play. And is there a difference? What did you have in
Yeah,
mind there?
that's a great question. I mean, I see this whole exercise as kind of a doing that, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that this got pulled into something that had nothing to do with work, but it was definitely inspired by what was going on at work,
Mhm.
right? Um, I don't know. I'm interested. I'm kind of curious. Like, have you had any experience in life where you've taken some of what we've done, either from what's in Arium or from how we've been working together, and use it in other places?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually quite furious when I figured out all these things existed and I hadn't had access to them before. I like set up Asana. I was like, "Hey, everybody, we're gonna start using Asana now. Like, here's your tasks. Make sure you get them done." And just doing that for both, like, I have like a small content creator community that I do that with, and then also my personal life, just like tracking everything that needs to get done, making sure I'm keeping up on my stuff. It's an amazing organizational tool that I've been lacking. Now I'm much more productive, and it also makes it fun. Like moving something over to the done column or like checking complete gives me that little hit of dopamine that I need so bad. I'm like, yes, it's finished. Get out of here. And then I get to see my done checklist like get larger and larger. I think we're at 70 in our Notion, Will, just with like all the stuff, all the tasks and projects that
Mhm.
we've completed. Yeah, it makes mundane things more exciting and also more organized, which gives me more joy in my life. I'm honestly surprised more people are using it.
It's funny the done column growing thing. Like it's great because I think a lot of just creators in general, they go a long time and be like, I do the same thing all the time, and it never like grows.
Mhm.
No one realizes the size of their accomplishments, unless
Mhm.
it goes viral, then everything is the same and nothing's moving forward or something. And so I think it's really great when you can it's almost like uh, a way to just help yourself psychologically.
Uh-huh.
Like, yes, I am getting a lot of stuff done, and that is good, and still following the plan or whatever. So yeah, I totally agree. It's awesome.
That's
Right.
so true. And it also helps like your friends, right? Like if you're in the group with them and they've been ticking things off, but they don't feel like they're moving forward, you have evidence to now say,
Yeah.
hey, go look at your done list. Look at everything you've done. You're amazing. I love the just like it's cold hard facts. You
Yeah.
did stuff. You're going somewhere.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
that's very
visual
cool.
too. It's like a
Mhm.
loading bar for your plans.
100%.
Yeah, I do like I've read most of Making Work Visible by Dominica de Grandis, and I think that's, I don't know if I said her name right, but it's such a cool, like it's, it just goes back to that, all the way back to sort of Toyota manufacturing, right? And the way that they've sort of uncovered these ideas of how making work visible just makes everything better, right? And it really does. It's really true.
Yeah, a couple of things that this whole conversation reminds me of. So, there are a lot of different retrospective formats that I've used at home, kind of namely like decision mapping. The one exercise, like, should Frodo throw the ring off of the top of Mordor or hide it and keep it for himself or whatever? Um, I've used lean coffees in all sorts of environments. And yeah, it's funny. I think that there's so much friction in the software industry that we need all these tools just to get along. And so, but we don't realize like how much some of these tools could help in even less stressful environments or less structured environments, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Um, and it's easy enough. It's just enough structure without too much structure. And I think, because too much can take a lot out of it for sure as well.
It's something about working with a device that can immediately calculate things faster than you can and give you instant feedback.
Yeah.
Tends to necessitate that
Yeah.
some of these tools. But yeah, in particularly lower stakes environments with regards to like something that you're doing for fun, like not necessarily setting up a party, but like planning a theme for a party. It's a little bit more fun than the other specifics of it. It helped.
Yeah.
Okay, so
My microphone died. Can you hear me now?
oh, sorry. Yeah. I
There
think
you go.
we have we're kind of getting to time. Is there anything that you'd like to plug or share before we close it up? Or any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts, Em?
You just said something about like organizing it and figuring out flow of things. I would say one more thing that's been kind of handy is using these tools and also like flow charts of how mechanics will work when we hand them to a playtester. This organization helps other people picking it up learn it quicker. So it's not just helpful for us, I think. I think using these tools makes the end user have a more enjoyable experience. I think that'd be probably my final thought.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. I think it's true. I don't know. It's always interesting to me when you go to a new place and you find out that people haven't ever done anything collaboratively, or they haven't, figured out how to make their work visible and whatnot. And you get, sort of these environments that I don't want to say that it's dysfunctional to a fault or by rule, but sometimes feels a little dysfunctional, right? And it's funny to me how fast some very simple changes can make a big difference in those types of environments. Even just, making sure that people have a voice, right? And that they're getting good feedback from the people that they're working with, like, constantly, right? Just that simple ability makes such a huge difference versus just handing someone something and saying, okay, here you go, this is your thing, let me know when you're done in 2 or 3 weeks, right? It just, that mode of working may work for some people, but I don't think it works really well for a lot of people. And so I don't know, I've been going through a sort of a transformation at my day job over the last 9 to 10 months or so, where, they weren't doing any of these types of things, right? And as we've gone through and implemented them, it's amazing to see how the light comes on for people over time. They're like, oh, that's just really a lot better, right? And what we're doing, it just feels better. And yeah, we are delivering more and sooner as well, but aside from that, it just feels better.
It is exciting, yeah, to like show up and be like, hey, so what are we going to work on today? And like be able to work on it with somebody side by side and get those ideas and improvements live. It's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, everybody knows I'm a big fan of collaboration. That did kind of kick something off in my head. What about, are there any other retrospective formats, or do you revisit how things are going, or just happy, sad, or anything beyond that? Anything other than Lean Coffee that you're using in any of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, of course, at work we're doing, all sorts of different types of retrospectives, and I think that's a really important part of figuring out how to improve and continue. I think you and I, we do experiments from time to time, right? Where we say, hey, let's try a new experiment, right? And just sort of see how it works. And I think that's the main form of retrospective that we've done, is hey, let's try a new experiment. And then when it's done, we'll talk about whether or not we liked it. And then we'll either continue doing it or we won't, right?
Yeah, I feel like in creation, especially if you have like a really smooth and good flow, it maybe retrospectives that are more common in the software industry that focus more on fixing the negative are not as necessarily as useful, but like turning up the good and other things like that.
Right.
Coming to my mind is it's like, where are the bright spots, and focusing on those. I think that'd be kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, the 4 whys is kind of my go-to for anything that's not immediately like work related, because that's what I hear most of the day anyway. Like, this question, I'm like, eventually you get to the point where I'm like, well, because I like it that way. Or it's just,
all right.
for
Are there plugging or sharing? So podcasts, games available, et cetera, anything that, Emily, would you like to start? And then
Sure. My name is Emily. As I said before, we've talked about the whole time. You can find most of my stuff at level1geek.com. We have a blog where we talk about how to get into the beautiful hobby of TTRPGs with confidence and knowing like kind of what's going on. You can also find like our podcast on many platforms where we do an actual play of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're doing Stolen Fate. And I stream all over the internet. I jump on any channel that needs a face, honestly. I'm there and playing.
For me, the best place to look is probably the website for Adepticus. It's just adepticus.com. You can see I've got links to socials and things there. You can also see the games that we're either currently have available or are producing. The Arium Create, Arium Discover games are there, as well as we just did a crowdfund for a new game called Science Starlight, which is a solo, it's lonely science fiction solo role-playing. And so we ran the crowdfunding for it over the holidays on Kickstarter, and did kind of a very tongue-in-cheek come be lonely with us for the holidays marketing campaign that actually worked really well. So that's fun. That's going to be coming out in digital forms here in like a week, and then it'll be in print in a few months. So yeah.
All right, very good. Well, and again, Luis, thank you for joining us as a co-host. And to our audience, if you know somebody that is in software development and is into TTRPGs or world building or games or fiction, then please share this episode with them. I'm sure that they'll find it very interesting. Please chat with us in the comments. Do you think this method of doing things would work or not? Tell us what you think. Like, subscribe, notification bell, all that. And thanks everyone for being on the show. Thanks for everyone for watching the show, and we'll see you all later. Bye, everybody.